thank you very much for coming. It's wonderful to see so many faces that I know personally. And to finish, and I think it probably is finished, this time for real, after 30 years, it's almost 30 years, that I was driving over that hill close to Stonehenge and just happened at that kind of 2 seconds glance that changed my life and other people's lives that I now see here today. It's been a mix. I have to say that I've met people and travelled the world in ways that would not have happened in my government job had it not been for circular areas compressed into vegetation. But it was also the end of a 20-year marriage. It was the end of my profession, and it ultimately was the goodbye to my country. And so I certainly have paid a price for going with my heart. And what I saw in the fields as an engineer, an electrical engineer, right back there in 1983, I could not account for. And to this day, I feel for the first time, actually the third time in the last 2 weeks, to be perfectly accurate, that I now feel confident enough that I can state categorically for me that I know what this is about. And it's been a long time coming. We've been many ups and downs, much deception, people making them, etc. And we'll get to all of that. This is going to be a no-holds-barred presentation. I'm prepared to answer any question that you have, any doubts that you might have. And I know that I am going to be asking you to have some confidence in the assessment of the material that I have. I know that I see one or two faces that of course, I don't know personally, and just might be that have not been to a crop circle kind of stroke UFO presentation before. That let me just say that I have worked with some of the best minds. I have advised a number of governments. The Queen Elizabeth and then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher back in England for several years on this subject. And it is not, we've not come easily to this day. I will be asking, I know, a very huge leap in confidence in my assessment of some of you today. But I'm going to go, as I say, no holds barred. We're going to go straight to it. Less than 10 days ago, I was presenting with Richard Hoagland and Dr. Stephen Greer near Tucson in Arizona, in the desert, and leaving there to Malta, Veneta in Malta, off of the toe of Italy, the north coast of Africa, to present this same material. You have actually a little more, this presentation, than those two, because I feel to bed the last 30 years right here on my back door, thanks to Pete and the team here. What a wonderful introduction, by the way. That was absolutely wonderful, and I do thank you very much. So it's the last and also the first time I've been presented like that, so thank you. Okay, well, we'll get right to it. And I think this time, a little different to the last two presentations I've just done, is I'll come immediately to the front, to the front of the presentation instead of leaving it to the back, where it has been, where I wanted to say, we know what the message is. I mean, very obviously, when you're looking at symbolism like this, you're looking at what it does scream out as a meaning. Well, I need to also put your minds at rest on one count before we proceed. If what you do throughout the next 2 hours is bounce everything that I say against are they man-made or are they real, you'll miss the conclusion. It's been a godsend the last 12 years, of the last 30, to be talking with the, you could say, with the enemy. I've been in discussions with people making crop circles. Those people who, for the previous goodness knows how many years, I felt were deceivers. The deceptive, sometimes perhaps under the heading of government agents, sometimes as experiential artists, and many other reasons for them making them. So in discussion with these people, I began to hear experiences they were having which were not only totally bizarre, they were the same kind of experiences that people in the research fraternity and members of the public were also having. And so it became clear to me that we had to broaden the research to embrace everything that was happening. Because when I set off on this trail, I didn't really feel that I belonged to this planet. I often felt it was out of place. I felt that I had just found 4 guys, 3 other guys and myself, forming the first crop circle research team in the world. But these were 3 people that I'd known before. Now, further down the road, on this day, in this place, I feel that our team are coming together, that we do now belong here, and we're going to be changing the world. That's where we are. We are at the crossroads. The planet, we and all life forms recognize it. We have no more spinning of the wheels, no more time to be grey. This is a time for black and white to be ourselves and to step up to the plate. So at the end, I'm going to go through a lot of material now, and so feel very comfortable. Try, if we can, there's a lot of people packed in, so doing our best to make sure you see what's on the screen, because it isn't me that's of any significance here, it's what's going to be on the screen. These are not the earlier books. The first book that kind of allowed me to say to hell with my whole-time profession was Circular Evidence, which was a big international best-selling book in 1989, which really allowed me to make the decision, which I don't know whether I do or do not regret. But anyway, my profession's a long time behind me, and we're here today together. So 2012 was written by Cynthia, my wife, and I together. We were asked to write it. This is something that's very bizarre. It's happened too in just relatively recent times. We didn't ask to write that. We were asked to write it. It came in as a matter of somebody saying, we think that you have the context, we think you know the people, we think you have what it takes to put that out fairly without the concerns that the movie 2012 produced, which was frankly scary and frightening to everybody on the planet. So we did our best with that, and that's what that book represents. The Akashic Record, you could probably substitute the words for consciousness, and that really is the study that I'm involved in now, and I wish probably for the rest of my life to dedicate my time to understanding human consciousness, that connects us to everything else, because we're going somewhere. We need a new home, and we're on the way. And so the Akashic Record really is about that. We thoroughly enjoyed writing it, and it's more of who we are in that book. Crop Circle Signs of Contact was brought out to coincide, not specifically so, but it happened to come out alongside the movie, which I did advise on, the Mel Gibson movie, Signs. And so that came out at the time. This is a book that I had never planned to write, but that I was forced to write, Government Circles. And I say forced because when I decided 5 years ago to take a step back, to get some energy back in, I was traveling like 3 countries a week roughly to convey the information to people who wanted to hear. And the British government decided that even though I had been very involved with them, their departments and their government, that they were going to rewrite history. Well, history is very important. And what they decided to do was that even though I'd been telling the public through television and radio and occasions like this, that they were monitoring, that is the Ministry of Defence, the police force in southern England, were monitoring this phenomenon. And that I was, as I've told you, advising Prime Minister Thatcher's cabinet and the royal family. Well, they decided they were going to rewrite this, and that was not so. It was in other words, I was lying. So they had Nick Pope, who was the former head of the UFO desk, UFO project for Ministry of Defence, wrote the government's official position, and that was they, first of all, were not monitoring. They had no interest. There was no national security implications for this phenomenon, and therefore it was not so. The royal family were not interested, etc., etc., etc. Well, I read this, and it was very alarming to me because they were about to release the first batch of secret UFO documents, and if this was the calibre of their truthfulness, then what were we going to be seeing? So I stepped forward and said, Nick, who I know, I used to attend meetings with this guy when he was in the position, at his MOD position in London. I used to fly from here with other people to meetings with the MOD and this guy. So I said, Nick, this has got to be put right. And if it is not put right, I will release documents I have to put it right. And it was 2 years. They failed to move on it. After all, who was Colin Andrews? And so I prepared to write this book. I opened a new website and I put the first documents online. These were personal letters to the Queen, to the Duke of Edinburgh, to Margaret Thatcher. These were people who nobody could question and doubt, whose signatures were on the papers in my possession over the top of this hill here in North Guildford. And so I started to stream it out. And what happened was that it was all online. I got a phone call from Great Britain threatening me that one particular document must be removed immediately from this presentation and from the last 4 or 5 presentations, including the major one that I was doing then in Washington, D.C. last summer. And failure to do so would cost me more than I could ever pay. And so what I did was I left the website up, I published this book, and withdrew one document. That document, I am prepared to discuss all of the surroundings to it today, if you want to go there. So that's very briefly why this book was published. And just to put this to bed, BBC Radio, telephoned me here in Guildford following my presentation in Washington, D.C. with Nick Pope. And unbeknownst to he or I, invited us on air live. Nick was on the programme, and they invited me on to join him for the second half of the programme. And I accepted and went on, and they were asking Nick about what the official position was, etc., etc. And they said, we have somebody on the line now who has a different point of view. So I came on, and on air, and it's on my website for anybody to hear if they want to hear it. He conceded on air in the public domain that he did what he had to do, his bosses had instructed him to do under the Official Secrets Act. And so that's the story. Not everybody wants us to know all there is to know about our world. Truth is important for where we're going. And so, as I move off onto the very first slide, I would just like to say that the message is this. You'll see this coming through consistently, that we are at the end of a very large cycle. The Mayans were absolutely on with this, right on target. These guys were astronomers and astrologers together, combined, saw the future in a very accurate fashion. Now, this is not a presentation about 2012, but it could just as easily be so, that we are transitioning into a new period for humanity, it isn't just simply that it will happen, it is available to us to embrace and to move forward with certain criteria in place. We're looking now and being demanded of us that we have a coherence of love, a coherence of respect, of truth and integrity. And nobody, no government, no religion, no secret society must hold back and make it anything different. This is the time. So that is the message. You'll see it come through constantly in very strange ways from very strange places, but that's really and truly what it's all about. Okay, so with that as a background, the beauty of it all, as I've put up there, a wonderful countryside in which to enrich the soul. 27 years later, what is going on? I'm going to be moving fairly quickly through this piece, and that is just simply to update you on evolving designs, some of which are made by people. And I'm going to ask you once again, don't let that worry you too much. You'll see why as we progress. Some of them, just for anybody that's not particularly conversant, some of these are many hundreds of feet. Just those between those tractor tire marks, you see these lines down through here, the double pairings all the way through. It's not always that they're exactly 40 feet apart. The various equipment does vary somewhat, but that's about 40 feet. So you're looking at hundreds of feet. Very large, complex designs, many of them perfect geometries. Some of them this year have been 3D in effect, visual effect. These are standing bands, standing columns. You can barely kind of make it out even at ground level, but from the air, it gives you that kind of 3D effect. You know, it used to be that I would stand for an hour and a half and tell you about each design. We're kind of past it now. This is about 13,000, by the way, now. It's roughly 13,000 individual designs in the database. The simpler, earlier designs of the 80s, back into the 70s, in fact, repeat still many times. One just days ago, which I'm going to show you in a moment, just in from Busty Taylor, since I've been back from Malta, and that's just a matter of hours ago. That's a little different, just to give you the nuances of it all. This is the usual placement, topographical positioning in central southern England that has been seeing now for many years, more than kind of 95, 96, 97% of the world's total design reports in just this area here. Well, this is the 2010, a much wider distribution of the designs across the country. There's a lot of UFO activity going on in here, but none that I know of that involves circular depressions. We did also go to Wales and I'll mention some of this in a moment with regard to the UFO. Back also in reasonable numbers, the simple patterns where it all began. You might know that I am the guy that coined the phrase crop circles, and I devised the term because it described at the time what it was we were looking at, and these were simple circles in cereal crops. It doesn't do justice now, of course, to what we're seeing, but that's where it came from. But we're kind of back there again in some numbers this year. This is Cynthia and myself just a couple of weeks ago, opposite Silbury Hill. What a magical place for anybody who still plans to go there. An area, a very small area, where extraordinary things are still going on. This was kind of a radial burst. It didn't have the well-defined cut-off edges of the more recent patterns, but nonetheless, it clearly is not just wind damage. There's something there. Something has happened there that's just a little unusual. I'm going to be coming back to Paul, or at least this field, in a few moments. As I say, we're going to be gathering data now from a wider spectrum of events than you probably have come expecting to see. This is Silbury Hill, the largest man-made mound in Europe, one of the largest in the world, pyramidal form, constructed of alternating layers of flintstone, chalk and soil, So that in fact it's a Leclanché cell which develops a very low level of voltage between the top and the base at the ground level. It's still a mystery as to why it was constructed. So we're coming back to this field in a moment. I was talking to somebody a few moments ago about the policeman event of last summer who witnessed 3 tall beings, which I'm going to be coming back to, a very extraordinary case which is still developing. That happened just over the top here, just in this field, but just over the top of the hill. Many strange paranormal kind of events have occurred in this very small area, and we're going to come back to them in just a moment. We had our own when we left here just a few weeks ago with Paul, my friend Paul Anderson. More of the same, unusual, little different. And this is just right in from Busty Taylor. In fact, just this morning I asked him for his permission to show it to you with his copyright. This is in maize. It's about 4 feet, getting on to 5 feet tall. It's a substantial plant which doesn't bend or break easily, and certainly you cannot manipulate it, play around with it, make circles in it without leaving substantial signs. This is in a virgin field. That, incidentally, is sampling. You can forget that. Coincidental that it is alongside, it's true. I have pursued what this is all about, and it's not in the equation. That was cut out by a farmer. They test it every so often. But this is a latticed, like a basket weave. It has been seen in the plants in cereal crops before, just here, and the 5 satellites. Just to show you that the kind of thing that you see there now is kind of like everybody's involved. It's a carnival kind of circus atmosphere where you can, these are people, you know, with their dogs who want to make sure and find out whether the dogs feel anything. Then you'll have vicars, you'll have, you know, ministers, you've got dowsers, you've got it all, scientists and politicians. They're in here doing their own thing. Well, I lost my good mate, my first co-author, Pat Delgado, last year. Pat and I wrote the first book together, did the early research together. He was an electromechanical design engineer on the NASA and Mariner project, who passed away before we had finalised another series of tests on a sound which is emanating from some trees in an area which is of significance and importance to us. And so this is Pat Delgado's daughter, Jan, who is a chip off the old block. We were recording the sounds inside this particular crop design. And as usual, we're doing a little bit of dowsing here. This is a couple of weeks ago. The military show up to do their little thing. This is the army, and they're, of course, taking photographs of us taking photographs. And, but they're not interested in any of it, of course. Another one over the top of us in this design. And just very quickly, although it meant a lot to me, and I think it did to the family, I wanted to plant a tree for Pat on his favourite golf club in England. And once it had been planted for us, and there's a little plaque there for him, we made sure that the sound was still emanating. This is it's ultrasound. It's the same frequencies that are used by the dolphins and by the US naval submarines, emanating from some of these trees in this area. And I say emanating, it's not as if you can hear it coming from the trees. It's the frequency from a probe that's pushed into the tree and in the ground that equates to that frequency. And we'll come back to that too. It's all part and parcel of a document I was instructed not to show you. And so, getting the negative side out of the way quickly, this is, I believe, quite important. Something's going on, something's been triggered in the, you could say, in the social infrastructure that ties us together, that allows us to be who we are on a day-to-day basis. The economy was triggered into collapse as the population is, by 2012, into 7 billion, can't sustain the resources, etc. Same situation. The religions are now coming into head-on collision course, and you can go on down through the pack, and it's no different. It's in every subject, it's almost in every marriage, it's in a personal level. We are being forced in front of a hall of mirrors. This is the time where the skeletons have to be seen, recognized, acknowledged, and most importantly, remedied. This is that time. And so in the crop circle phenomenon, it is no different. In the subject of the crop circles and the UFO, of which I am part because of the connection, it is no different. In Great Britain this year, the friction between what I would call the truth seekers, people who will stop at nothing for the truth. That's what we all deserve. But the friction is there because there is also an inner group, as there is in all subjects, that are, I could say, and it's not going to be my business to name people, it's not what I'm about. I'm just coming to the problem, that's all. There is a myth-making. There is a need, perhaps for financial reason, perhaps for egotistical reasons, to promote something which is not true. And so the friction now caused by those people who are seeking at great cost to them personally, something that is being promoted in the centre as a myth. In other words, they're all real, none of them are man-made. If that is put out and continue to be put out, it's going to explode at some point. Well, this is explosion point. There's undercover operations going on here of which I am aware. People will finish up, I believe, in court. It's gotten unpleasant. Well, we had to get there. It had to happen.
I have to do this, Colin. Is that devices?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Louise is very connected to the crop circle, Mr. and has been for quite a few years now, and at great cost too. So this is where we are. And also, a little bit at the bottom there, I'm going to come to and speak to in a little bit more detail, the ramifications of farmers' anger after an incident last year when a farmer, allegedly, I have to use this term, fired a gun over the heads of researchers coming into his field. Now, there's a lot of ramifications to that. It means the farming community are up to here because they've got a lot of stuff going on in their fields. They don't understand it. They are, on one hand, being told by the officials, government in particular, National Farmers Union, and the police, that they are man-made. Well, if they're man-made, this is a nuisance they won't stop in real quick because they're losing their crops. So there's a lot of friction in that area. And we're going to get back to this because now the police have got a real dilemma. This is a meeting just a couple of weeks ago that I asked if it were possible to pull together. This is a man that means quite a lot to the following story. This is where we're going to start the thread and run it through well over 30 years to the message. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist, of course, but just looking at what we've got on the screen here, it's a lump of flesh, as we know, weighing about 3 pounds. You can hold it in the centre of your hand. It can contemplate the vastness of interstellar space, the meaning of infinity, ask questions about its own existence, and the nature of God. This is truly the most amazing electrochemical machine we know of, and we each have one. It's made up of neurons. Estimated 100 billion in an adult human brain, almost as many as, this is my sarcasm, as many dollars as the bank stole from us in the era we are leaving. Sorry, had to say it. Each neuron makes between 1,000 to 10,000 contacts with other neurons in the brain. Based upon this, it has been calculated that the number of permutations and combinations of brain activity exceeds the number of elemental particles in the universe. Well, this is where it kind of starts to get interesting. When I stretch out to touch that microphone, my motor neurons fire. When you watch me move to squeeze that microphone, you have a virtual reality by a subset of mirror neurons that also fire. The only difference between you and me is that when I squeeze that microphone, I get an auto feedback system that tells my neurons that by the sensory systems in my skin, embedded in my skin, that it's me that's doing this. And so the only thing that separates us in that process is, between you and me, is my skin. And so this is the beginning, the very beginning, that pipeline that feeds us to a place where we can soon be certain that consciousness is not owned by an individual. It's not an individual consciousness, but that the subset, those mirror neurons that are contacting each other subset of about 20% in the brain, also contacting other subsets in other people, is the collective consciousness. So you'll begin to see where I think this comes together in a cohesive, shared environment with another species of another mind, that we are, I believe, on a journey somewhere from the beginning to another part of the universe with another mind. This is humanity and another mind, a higher mind. We are spiritual beings. Just happen to be having a human experience at this time. So the neurons, I think, is the real key, and you'll see how this plays some very, very strange tricks, appear to be that, with us on our way through this trip now, this turret. I showed you just a short time ago Paul Anderson, a friend of mine in that simple circle opposite Silbury Hill. Well, 29th July, Cynthia and I said goodbye to Paul, and you didn't see in that photograph was his family were there too. He had joined us from his work. He came down in one vehicle. His wife with the two boys came down in a second, and we had a hired vehicle parked alongside. Now, Louise and others here will know, who have visited Silbury Hill, that mound that was behind him. This is a very fast stretch of road. It's awfully fast. It's a small road, but fast. It's a major highway. It's a short stretch, straight stretch, in which there's a bend here and a bend coming in and out. And the guys at night appear on that straight stretch out of nowhere. They come round the bend there, round the bend here, and you've got moments at about 70 miles an hour. Well, what happened was this. Paul left, said goodbye, headed off. Cynthia and I got in our car. We drove around his wife, who was still parked here, and a very momentary distraction was she, I'm not blaming her for this, but it was nonetheless a distraction. She honked her horn just to say bye. Well, I was halfway across the road at night, 11 o'clock-ish, dark, headlights straight at me. And in that moment of time, in saying bye, I had not a clue whether I was in America or England. I know it kind of sounds funny, but I didn't know which side of the road I should go. And I was in a position of about a second or a second and a half decision. Should I steer right and hit this car head on, or left and hit it head on? I just simply did not know. And I thought we were goners. But as this happened, and I was in that place of thinking, that's it. Lights right at us, the wheel was wrenched out of my hand. It was literally, it was just like that. The vehicle came left, and these vehicles went straight past my mirror on the right-hand side. And so the choice, whatever did that, was the right one. I said to Cynthia, and my friends here that have heard this, because I can barely stop talking about it, I tell you, for miles and for days, I kept saying to Cynthia, as it happened, you saved us. You saved us. And Cynthia said, I didn't do anything. I said, you wrenched the wheel. You took the wheel out of my hand. She said, I touched nothing. So, now, what's it got to do with crop circles? What's it got to do with anything? I don't know, but you'll see something begin to form here, I think, as time goes on. this area, this particular stretch of road, there's all kinds of things going on. I am not by any means the only person to be relating something of that kind to you. And so put that aside, this was 90 feet away from where the tall beings were last summer that the police officer saw, and I'm going to be coming back to that. Well, we're really switching around here. This is a person I had great attachment to and feeling with. And I've told you of some of my connections with the royal household, and you know, we can come in here a little bit further in a second. This is a photograph I took of Princess Diana with Charles. I was in my government position then, and I sort of looked out a spot for myself when they came in on their honeymoon into the town where I had some authority. And so I was very pleased to take that photograph, but it's there simply to set this next frame up. I'll just let you read that for a moment. I had been asked to show Prince Charles and Princess Diana around the fields where there were crop circles because Charles was having, as indeed the Queen, but we're talking about Charles right now, were getting them on their own property. These were fields out of bounds to the public. And so I was asked by a backdoor contact if I would show him round with Princess Diana. This was the time when, regrettably, there was a conflict in the royal household. MI5 and MI6 were recording just about everything and everything surrounding these people. And so just before I was to show them around and sworn to secrecy, it was leaked to this national newspaper, who put it on the front page, hence they scuttled the actual meeting. Well, this is something I want to share with you too. Each time we come to something like this now, I'd like just for you to kind of ask yourself, where did that come from? Where did the wheel, steering wheel, where did that come from? Where did what I'm about to tell you come from? August the 31st, 1997, this is our home in Collins Drive in Branford in Connecticut. We had just come back, I think, with Mel and the family. I believe you were there. We headed back from an evening at my wife's mother's. We pulled into the driveway. I remember the light bouncing off of this light-coloured siding. Look at my watch. 11 p.m. is just after. 11 p.m. we pulled into this driveway, and I, for reasons I will never know, came right out of my mouth this term. Cynthia is not here today, and regrettably, she intended to be here. And I always look to her to say, you know, Cynthia doesn't lie, and she'll tell you this happened. You will be my Princess Diana from now on, is what I said. It came right out my mouth. She looked at me, she said nothing, I said no more. We got out the vehicle, we went inside, we went up to bed, asleep. The next morning, I was so depressed, I cannot tell you. Cynthia went down, grabbed a cup of coffee, came back up, and I said, you know, I can barely get my chin off the floor. She said, what's the problem? What's happening? I said, I don't know. I said, but I feel just so depressed. The telephone went from Shannon, my wife's brother. And she said, you should tell Colin, Princess Diana is dead. And this is what I want to share with you. Remember neurons, okay? Mirror neurons. At 12:23 a.m. French local time, the crash occurred. Initially conscious, Diana went into cardiac arrest. Work by medical staff restarted her heart, but at 4 a.m., Diana died. The press were informed at 5:30 a.m., minus 6 hours to US Eastern, is 11:30 p.m. Something inside of me, with that attachment I had for her, as if I knew her, and perhaps I did, one day, some time ago. I knew she was gone before the media were informed. And so this isn't about me saying what is anything special about me. I'm just simply saying there's a thread here I think is worthy of further consideration. And so, like bees, I say here, called to the hive, the process began. It all started, the crop circles, all started with an orange ball of light in November 1976. Before I get to it, look at I'd like just to point that out to you quickly. This is different to what you're seeing in a lot of the man-made material these days. This particular fingerprint is very different. But we're not going to be hanging around on that today. The circles have spoken. November 13, 1976, a Mrs. Joyce Bowles and Ted Pratt, a friend, were driving just here on the outskirts of Winchester. This is the old ancient capital of England, Winchester in southern England. They saw an orange ball of light coming down alongside the highway just here. The city is underneath here, just over here. I'd like just for a few moments, we're going to tap straight into the internet now. And while we're doing this, I don't think it's necessary to hear the entire interview that was conducted with these people shortly after this experience in '76. But it's important, I think, for you to make your own judgment on the veracity, the honesty, the calibre of these people. Asking yourself, is this just a lot of nonsense or not? So let's just go in here, just for a few moments, and take a listen. We'll come back.
One November evening last year, Mrs. Bowles and a friend of the family, Mr. Pratt, were driving out of Winchester when they saw a light in the sky, a light seen by many other people that night.
This is where we see the large orange light.
That's right, yes, we did. Yes, on their left.
On the left here.
Yes. And
then it disappeared, and I am coming up to it now. It appeared again here. But
right.
It started hovering down below the back of these trees and the hedges here.
So we came on down the road for another quarter of a mile, maybe a bit more. We turned sharp left to come into Chilcombe Lane. It's a bad bend, isn't it? Going down this lane, and we were doing about 20 mile an hour, maybe 20, 25 mile an hour. Done about 70 yards down, all of a sudden this car suddenly went crazy. It just leapt off the road to the right, and the engine started to rev. We hit the grass verge, which is a very wide grass verge, about 15 yards wide, and we were heading towards a high edge. So I grabbed the steering wheel as Mrs. Bowles was fighting with it, and suddenly the car straightened itself. We came down the grass verge for about 10 to 15 yards, and we came to a stop. And it was though we'd hit an invisible barrier, which it gave, because it didn't throw me forward into the seat, but it gave and then brought us back to our normal stopping position.
That was when we see...
Well, then sorry, yes?
That was when we see what I shall say a cigar-shaped object hovering in front of us. Inside were 3 figures.
Yes, they had like a cockpit in the cabin was in the front of the cigar-shaped thing, and was lit up, but not glowingly lit up. It was a very easy light to look at.
It was hovering. It had either steam or vapour coming out like gas jets. Then I see one of these figures get out of this thing, this object, and it started walking across towards me.
Yes, it was.
Now, as it was walking across towards me, I heard a whistle.
Which I didn't hear.
It's like a whistling kettle starting to whistle. Now, he had on like a boiler suit, but it was with a polar neck collar. He had a seam down on his right-hand side. As he walked across, he come to my window. He put his arm on the roof of my car and looked in. Now, he was a tall man, roughly 6'1", 6'2". He had pink eyes, which were very piercing. He had sideboards and a beard, which met. He looked in at me, then he looked at Ted. After looking at Ted, he looked at my dashboard. And as he was looking at the dashboard, my car engine started up. Now, the car ignition keys was turned off. And as the engine started up of my car, my headlights were 4 times powerful than what they normally are. It was just like a glow of white. I see a movement of this figure. Oh, by the way.
Sorry to kind of just break it there. You're actually going to miss no part of this because you'll see how it comes together in a few moments. A little while after that, just a matter of days later, over here, they had another experience. This time, there was about a 2-hour missing period of time, and they found themselves driving on the south coast, some miles away, near the English Channel. But whilst they had this experience, they both remember very clearly that inside of a very bright white light, they were shown something like this. I had a discussion just last week with Richard Hoagland down in Arizona. There's a very similar case that he is aware of, where, in this case, it looks like a star map, but Ted Pratt, the guy that you heard there, kind of gestured to these tall beings, "What is this?" And with some kind of energy, it was kind of almost annoyance, according to both of them, as if they were expected to know what it was. They said this, and this is going to play out I think, quite significantly here now. Look at the patterns on here. And what they said was, this is our field. This is our field. This is right back 1976. Well, this becomes really rather important. That was 1976, and this was the first event. 1977, the first crop circle. Simple circle, as is seen inside of this white light. And in successive years, each of the designs shown, the simple one with the single ring appeared here, with 2 rings appeared here, and many others. The first pictogram ever to appear on planet Earth appeared right next to the first simple circle, this time two connected by a straight line, right there in 1990. The first photographic evidence of crop circles on planet Earth is right here. And this is how the ingredients comes together. Now remember, we're now looking at people who deceive, people who have had a UFO experience, people who research them, all now being attracted to the beehive, the honeybees in the center, their field. This is our field. Even the guys, the Doug and Dave, the two elderly senior citizens who told the world in 1991 that they had made crop circles, if you might remember, they frequented this pub alongside our field. Pat Delgado lived up here, I lived up here, Terence Meaden lived over here, and Busty Taylor just a matter of a couple of hundred yards away from me. So the ingredients, this, you could say, the stage was set in our field. It gets stranger. The meeting that I was at just a couple of weeks ago in England on the border with Wales, we got to speak to this man here, a retired police officer who now admits he saw what he claims was a 9 feet, he was in uniform on his way off duty, 9 feet tall approximately, being in the same outfit as Joyce Bowles, you just heard describe in our field, the same night, less than 100 miles northwest of this position. So now you're looking at authority supporting an extraordinary claim related to our field. So that, I mean, there's much more to it, but that's the brief outline. Now, this is where it gets kind of weirder, and perhaps I'll lose some of you here, because I admit that this is on the edge. But I'm going to give it to you as it is. This is for all of us to make our own minds up with. Now, this word synchronicity and coincidence, we've been talking about it tonight already. I was sat in my home at that time, in my first marriage, with my very first tape recorder. I had just purchased it. It was a very large Elizabethan thing. You know, it's not like today's. It was like this, hence that. And this thick, with the green valve and the little red mark in the middle for sound levels. And I was on the floor, just like this carpet. The television's up in the corner of the room. We're in a very little house. And I pushed the microphone across the carpet, big microphone like that, towards the television, because I was just testing the sound. And I turned it on, I kind of put the lever left and pushed it up, and it held on to record. And sound levels were about right. But I'm hearing in the background, I was listening to the news, ITN, Independent Television News. There were only 3 networks in Great Britain at that time. And I was listening to the news in the background as I'm just doing this. And the sound of the broadcaster is slowly diminishing. Then it breaks. I looked up and the screen has gone into white speckles, just white, picture's gone. He's gone, sound's dropping right out. And what I heard and recorded, because my microphone is on there just testing my tape recorder, thousands of other people heard as well. And what they heard was this. Now, I just want to point out where it is. The transmitter that covers this area is Hannington, transmits the area that covers our field and what is now, to this day, the most extraordinary level, the greatest level of crop circle reports in the world. Well, this is what came out of that television set. This is 1 year after the UFO experience, November 26, just where the bug is, 1977. Now, there's no need either for us to listen to all of this. I just want you to hear it, and then I'm going to read to you what it said, just so that you can hear it. What's on the screen is not what was on the screen at the time. Whoever put this together has put in their own overlay. What you're hearing, I'll cue you in. what you're hearing is the actual sound. If all of this is a nonsense, it's a coordinated international conspiracy. And
The
it's
Rhodesian
doubtful.
nationalist leader, Bishop Abel Muzorewa, has accepted Mr. Smith's offer to negotiate an internal settlement based on one man, one vote. But, he says, there are conditions. These include stopping the execution of all captured prisoners of war, allowing Giroud to take part in negotiations, being arrested. In Australia, Mr. Kerry Packer's cricketers are still being interviewed by yesterday's High Court decision, which lifts the ban on them playing in Test matches.
This is the voice of Allah, representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. For many years you have seen us as lights in the skies. We speak to you now, we serve with them as we have done to your brothers and sisters all over this, your planet Earth. We come to warn you of the destiny of your race and your world so that you may communicate to your fellow beings the course you must take to avoid the disaster which threatens your world and the beings on other worlds around you. This is in order that you may share in the great awakening as the planet passes into the new age of Aquarius. The new age can be a time of great peace and evolution for your race, but only your rulers are made aware of evil forces that can overshadow their judgments. Be still now, and wish, for your chance may not come again. All your weapons of evil must be removed. The time for conflict is now past, and the race of which you are a part may proceed to the higher stages of its evolution, if you show yourselves worthy to do this. You have but a short time to learn to live together in peace and goodwill. Small groups all over the planet are learning this, and exist to pass on the light of the dawning new age to you all.
This, I can well appreciate how this might kind of resonate with you. Let me just say that technically, this is not for that broadcast to be interfered with and overlaid by an extraneous frequency would first of all need to be extremely close to the transmitter, would have to be extremely high powered, and at the frequency or a correlation of it, a harmonic of it, also. This is not off of your shelf kind of gear to start with. It's very high frequency. It was VHF at the time, went up to UHF. This is not equipment that is easily available. The Independent Broadcasting Authority, of which is on that tape, but I've cut it short because of the time factor, there was an interview with the IBA who conducted 3 investigations into this because it concerned a lot of people. It had me going. I mean, it was like, what was that? People flooded the switchboards asking what was going on. It still, to this day, remains a mystery. But this is what it said. Remember, this is the area covering our field. This is the voice of Vrillion, a representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. For many years you have seen us as lights in the skies. We speak to you now in peace and wisdom, as we have done to your brothers and sisters all over this, your planet Earth. We come to warn you of the destiny of your race and your world, so that you may communicate to your fellow beings the course you must take to avoid the disaster which threatens your world and the beings on our worlds around you. This is in order that you may share in the Great Awakening as the planet passes into the new age of Aquarius. The new age can be a time of great peace and evolution for your race, but only if your rulers are made aware of the evil forces that can overshadow their judgments. Be still now and listen, for your chance may not come again. All your weapons of evil must be removed. The time for conflict is now past, and the race of which you are a part may proceed to the higher stages of its evolution if you show yourselves worthy to do so. You have but a short time to learn to live together in peace and goodwill. Small groups all over the planet are learning this and exist to pass on the light of the dawning age to you all. You are free to accept or reject their teachings, but only those who learn to live in peace will pass to the higher realms of spiritual evolution. Hear now the voice of Vrillian, a representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. Be aware also that there are many false prophets and guides operating in your world. You'll hear this repeated in a number of other ways shortly. They will suck your energy from you, the energy you call money, and will put it to evil ends and give you worthless dross in return. Your inner divine self will protect you from this. You must learn to be sensitive to the voice within you that can tell you what is truth and what is confusion, chaos and untruth. Learn to listen to the voice of truth which is within you, and you will lead yourself onto the path of evolution. This is our message to our dear friends. We have watched you growing for many years, as you too have watched our lights in your skies. You know now that we are here, and that there are more beings on and around your earth than your scientists admit. We are deeply concerned about you and your path towards the light, and will do all we can to help you. Have no fear, seek only to yourselves, and live in harmony with the ways of your planet Earth. We of the Ashtar Galactic Command thank you for your attention. We are now leaving the plane of your existence. May you be blessed by the supreme love and truth of the cosmos. Well, like I say, I showed you where that was. Now jump on 20 years or so, and at the base of the second transmitter, covering the same area, just here, this is our fields, just here. Hannington transmitter is up here, and this is the second one covering the same area near Winchester, the county, the old capital of England, Winchester. This is now August 15, 2002. There's a high degree, as you can see, this is a crop circle here, a crop marking, hundreds of feet across, a high degree of mathematical sophistication, and the use of an optimization algorithm to position these bits here. These are ASCII code bits deciphering through what we know now, and we've designed our computers to read. This reads very much like the last one. Beware the bearer of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, still time. There's a damaged word in here. There is good out there. We oppose deception. It comes through constantly. We oppose deception. Conduit closing. That's a bell sound, which is, we're done. We're out of here. You've had your warning. So we go on. Just to recap, 76, UFO event, this is our field. 77, the first crop circle, planet Earth, as far as we know. I can debate that with other possibilities, but we've got photographic evidence, hard evidence from the farming community here. First pictogram, as shown on the inside of this craft, or whatever we want to call it, here. The circles with rings, double rings, triple rings, here. Just here, Operation White Crow, a surveillance operation which I coordinated, which resulted in very bizarre sound recorded you're about to hear, and was instrumental in the British government asking me to withdraw a document that you will not be allowed to see today. That was here. And it's something I'm about to talk about right here, 1986. So, I'll get there. Now remember, this was missed by so many people at the time, including myself. Two senior citizens, Doug Bauer, Dave Chorley, who I had the pleasure of meeting, who claim to have made the crop circle mystery, the phenomenon. They claim to have made those crop circles. Well, note very carefully what they said to my colleague. I was once a director of a television company with the BBC director John McNish. He and I were co-directors of that company. John went undercover after we did several television documentaries for BBC Television, got very involved in this subject, dug right in, very intrigued by it. He interviewed Doug and Dave and went undercover that they were not aware of, and became convinced that they did indeed make a lot of those early crop circles. So he put a documentary together. He wrote this book, Crop Circle Apocalypse, and we was ready to bring them out together when sat right in front of him, the two guys themselves, with this conversation. I can't explain it. Dave can't explain it either. But when we sit in the fields, we're sitting in the field and looking at the whole thing, that feeling comes through to us, that feeling of mystery, that feeling of, why are we here at all? There was a long silence and Doug sat staring at me. This is John McNish. Then Dave picked up. Doug used to say to me sometimes while we were out there and we'd just done one, meaning just made a crop circle, why do we do it? And we could never explain that certain thing. And Doug used to say, do you think there's something that makes us? That did and still does really get to us. Were we being told almost to go out and do them? I know it sounds crazy. Well, it sort of doesn't now that we've gotten this far down the road. This was that event on the map that I was just showing you. This is Busty Taylor, light aircraft pilot, who has been with us right the way through from the beginning. He's flying his aircraft, he's kicked it over. We've had many of them in this particular field, so he flies over it regularly. We're looking for these designs. And Busty says to me, it would be interesting to have one, a crop marking, made up of all of those we've seen so far. Well, so far, in August 86, was what you're looking at. Simple circles, of which the first was down the road, 3 in a straight line, this is the one that started Pat Delgado, 5 forming a cross, that's the one that started me in 85, and the circle with a single ring alone. Well, I'm not making this stuff up. 24th of August, 86. Aircraft positioned where that cross is. Next day, over the road, there's the aircraft the day before, right there, across the other side of the road, just exactly what he had said. Everything laid together. There it is. You can see it for yourself, forming one design. Just as we put this, for anybody who's got circular evidence, you will know that we made reference to this uncanny situation where we would be having our discussions. I can just relay very quickly one with Terence Meaden. He's a meteorologist saying, well, you know, everything here complies with the law of angular momentum. If you've got a simple circle swirled clockwise, if you get a ring around it, it's swirled anti-clockwise, it's in balance, much like we see in meteorology, until the very day we said it. And in the field next door, the next day, was exactly the opposite, as if it was saying, oh no, it ain't going to be that straightforward. And so this is the way it goes on. It's just like a part of you is listening to yourself. It really feels like that we are on this journey with more than one part of ourselves. So 88, this is where it gets very personal for me. This is my dad. This was a circle with 2 rings, as you can see. Farmers reported it, we've gone out, investigated it, gone home. Well, I lived close to this. There it is down here. I was in a troubled marriage, which I've told you, and I lived here on the outskirts of the town of Andover, and I was alone, and I put my hands together and I focused upon that design. And in my head, I prayed to, I will say, God. This is still a mystery to me. For me, there is a higher force, and we can call it, and I respect, we can call it and believe it to be God, and other, I believe, other high forms. And so I was praying to God for this design, and what I said in my head, and you only have me to believe, is this design as close to my home, it was in two parts, this design as close to my home as possible. That was the circle with 2 rings you saw my dad in. This is the field closest to my home. There's the boundary that's all short grass for another 2.5 miles. That appeared that night. Exactly what I had visualized in the field closest to my home as possible. I did not make this, and I've communicated what happened to me to nobody. And the farmer who, as you can see, was harvesting here, Jeff Smith, he's appeared on a number of television documentaries about this, Unsolved Mysteries being one that comes to mind, can vouch. He was driving his combine harvester, knowing about this, suddenly sees that. Gave us 2 hours to do the research. This aircraft was up and over. I'm taking the photograph in Busty Taylor's aircraft less than 2 hours later. That was the design, and that is the closest field to my home. Now, once again, we can say coincidence. Well, this is where it gets very, very touchy for the royal family in Great Britain. This is a photograph taken by an authority who, in the British Parliament, the British people were told, as I have also mentioned to you, does not exist. In other words, the police were not monitoring, Ministry of Defence are not monitoring involved. Well, this is Hampshire Police's own photograph, and this car down here with the guy on a phone is me talking to the police aircraft that was caught out of Lyon surveillance place on the south coast. So at that time, that was a function and a cooperation that I was receiving from the police in Great Britain and other Minister of Defence operational facilities. And so this was one small piece of what was put into government circles to put the record straight. But we're going to go into some detail now, which will get very close to the document that I had withdrawn. And I kind of just have to go there because you'll begin to see that we're all in this together, and people in high places would far rather that you do not have this information. So this is June 1989. These people, this is all on my website, this is Operation White Crow, only the second only ever surveillance operation trying to capture these things forming on film. So we were set up with some good equipment, sophisticated equipment, weather station on site. This guy headed that, Dr. Terence Meaden, head of Tornado and Storm Research Organisation in Great Britain. Busty is here, Don Tursley, George Wingfield, who has got many contacts inside the British government, and other people that I can't put in there, and Ron Jones. Well, as I say, this does deserve to be a much, much longer piece, but I just for now want to hone in to George Wingfield and his brief statement here. A year or so before this, I was in a field where we had already done some research and we had left for home. I returned alone and again did this. This is important in my opinion, is to kind of go back inside, is sincerity, truth, sincerity, and to check in with who you are inside. And I said, please give me a clue what's happening here. This is not here, this is a year before. And immediately, in response to that thought, was a sound. That sound you're going to hear in a moment, it wasn't recorded at the time, I just dealt with it as it occurred. I wasn't expecting it. I prayed for something to give me a clue, and immediately this sound comes back, which was extraordinary. And it was kind of a loud, trilling kind of a continuous, very close to me, as close as the dog is right here, 6-7 feet away, and it was amazing. I could feel the level of energy moving on my cheeks. It was that loud, that vibrant. Well, come back now forward a year, we're here, and we were meditating together. Some of these are real scientific types, didn't feel real comfortable with the meditating process. Some people don't. But then nonetheless, we were there. We're around in a circle and we're meditating. And suddenly, the sound showed up. This time it's going round and round and round us, just in a stereophonic kind of effect. You could hear exactly where it was, going round and round and round, and then it stopped. And it came down to about, probably 25 feet away. Pat Delgado felt he was being called to the sound. He felt this inside. I did not. I mean, with the rest of the group, stayed where I was. Pat went over to it, to the sound, and he started scooping on the top of the plants. He calls me over, and he started scooping into here. He's going to go off like this. I didn't know what he was doing. I just took whatever he was, he was kind of offering. And he stopped. I went back to join the others, and then suddenly, this gets close to why there's a document pulled from my side. He went backwards at about 40 odd degrees, where he should have fallen on his back. He went back and he stayed there. I can't do it, or else I'll be on my back. Like this. And his face was absolutely terror. And he puts his hand out to me. We're very good friends. It's like, and he said, Colin. And he's gone back like this. And I went straight to him, held his hand, and both of us were going back, being pulled back. So I just put all I could. And it was like pulling two bubbles apart. It was just like that. We broke free, broke away from whatever it was, and we got out of there. Well, George he shouted out to the sound as all this was happening, make us a circle. Make us a circle. I first of all want you to hear the sound, and then we'll get back to make us a circle. This is the sound that was recorded just a few moments later. It continues. You've got little pieces here, but it's continuous. Now this is slowed down 50%, so you can hear. That's 5.4 kilohertz in audible frequency, which has shown up now on a number of occasions within 0.2 of the same frequency, you'll see. Over the hill the next day, official Hampshire police photographs, they actually had a ground unit come to our control facility and told us that over the top of the hill where we were, there was a new circle with a ring. And that's their photographs taken of this circle with a ring, which appeared to have responded to George's request. This was the headline, British newspapers shortly after, July '89, UFO blasts television crew from Circle of Corn. Well, now this is very similar, but it's also got extraordinarily fringe edges to it. I had just finished my interview with a sound much like this. I've got a lead stuck on the back of me here, and that was very similar, it's identical to an interview we were doing for BBC Television for another programme. I had finished my interview, came to the edge of the circle, a large circle, this one here, over here. TV crew there, got a camera, it's got a big boom going up. Into the circle goes Pat Delgado for his interview. And as he's set up, he's on air, they've just kind of brought him in, it's being filmed for a later television segment. Suddenly I can hear the sound. And, once heard, never forgotten, you've just heard it. This shrilling sound is coming out of the headset of the sound guy, just as Dan is back there now with his headset on. And the guy's going like this. It's like, my God. Pat Delgado, at the same time, some of you might have seen the footage. Remember, the camera's still rolling. And Pat's going, it's all around me. It's all around me. It's being caught by his microphone, the lead, the transmitter, here. He's inside the energy field, and his hair on his head is rising, his arms. He's feeling the electrostatic field, and they're recording, for the second time, the sound. Well, we headed, at their invitation, incidentally, all the red lights are coming up on the television camera, and after a couple of minutes or so, the television camera was destroyed. Not before they had it in the can, the actual footage, the recording in the can, taken away to Birmingham Pebble Mill Studios, where we were invited to do a live piece on air a couple of days later. And this is what happened there. This is us, a much younger Colin Andrews on the end with Pat. And this is the sound engineer as it was happening. He's trying to squelch it out and do all kinds of things here. It isn't having any of it. This is Pat saying, it's all around me. I can feel it. Television camera over here is destroyed. Well, they come on air. They're going down 10 seconds on air. 9, 8, 7, 6. On the segment comes, they're going over from national news in Great Britain to the studio to do this piece. They start running the footage, and as they got to the actual clip itself, out went all supply to the entire studio. So all of that happened. Everybody in Britain knows about all this stuff because it literally terminated the program. The automatic generators kicked in and, of course, brought the whole thing back up. And so that is the BBC sound. I don't think there's any real point in me pressing it. It's the same stuff, 6.6 kilohertz, recorded by BBC Television. Right. I'm going to widen it a little bit further. July 27, 2003. This is a Tai Chi instructor, Graham Pritchard, who I've interviewed now several times. He and his brother decided to make this flower of life design here. Sketched it out, worked out how they would make it, just two people. And they would make it and place it in a field called Barbary Castle. This is well known to people who've been following this subject because of the exquisite nature and sacred geometry of a design that appeared in mysterious circumstances in Barbary Castle, England, back in 1990. So if they decided that's where we're going to put their special one that they're going to make. That particular night, Graham's brother became ill. Not seriously ill, just didn't feel up to doing it. And so it was not made by them that night. That appeared in the same field, Barbary Castle, that very night. Not by them at all. What you're looking at here is vast. It's actually what you're looking at is after harvest. These are plants that have been compressed to the ground and snipped by the harvester. Secondary germination has taken place here with the green is. Just to give you that, there is no question that's the same design that they designed, they planned in the same field the same night. But that field's rather special. Okay. On the top of that layer, we put another. This is the satellite from Google of Avebury, large archaeological site, Silbury Hill, which we've been talking about. This is where the wheel got kind of tugged out of my hand here. This is where a police officer were coming back to, saw three tall beings just here. We could go on and many, many, many others. This is a crop circle picked up by the satellite at the time. This is the southern entry into the Avebury Stone Circle site. We're going to have a look right now to this little area here. Just take note, just for referencing purposes, of these three large trees. 30th of July, 1999. Diane Krishna, with a group of individuals, meditated and decided amongst themselves on the spot, right here next to these trees, to meditate for that pattern. Now, I'm going to use the word urge. The trigger is where something suddenly comes from. You accept as your thought, as an urge, an inspiration, an intuitive feeling that you believe is yours. Well, this is what the group had. They did their meditation. That's the pattern they decided upon to meditate for. 30th of July. The same night, just after 10 o'clock, this guy here, Matthew Williams, who is known to everybody in this subject. Matthew is not liked by a great number of people because he makes crop circles. And that night, just after 10 o'clock, he's at his home, he lives alone. He had the urge to make this design. He said, I just felt I had to do it. I got in my car, I figured I could do this alone because it's a design that's, you know, if the diameter of the circumference goes 6 times, I can do this alone. So he heads out, he has no idea where he's going to do it. He's going to do this pattern on urge. So he comes out, he lives way up here, he comes down, along this main road, A4. This is the highway that nearly killed us both. Along here, and he turns right into the avenue, and now heading up to Avebury. He sees the field on the right, he decides, that's where I'm going to put it. As he's walking in here, he heard voices. And he says that he heard chanting. He says he heard a guitar being strummed. And he thought, those guys are way too close. There's no way I'll be able to get in here and make this. You can't see them, but you can hear them. And he reckoned they're probably about 100 feet or so, 100 feet or so away. I can't do it. So he stood and he did a process, which he says he does all the time when he makes crop circles. And he felt he would be invisible. He has felt this before, that he could shield himself and he would be invisible. So he went in, he made this as the temperature dropped dramatically and a mist appeared in this valley here. That, by the way, at Operation White Crow, we had the weather station there where I told you Pat went backwards. We had a weather station there and exactly the same thing happened. We had a dramatic temperature drop, barometric pressure drop, the barometer went way down the graph, localised, all that was checked out with the Met Office, it was not across southern England, it was local to that area. So we can certainly vouch for that. You know many people who have had their own personal experiences and there's a dramatic temperature drop, that conversion. So he felt this too. Well, when he left, he did his job and he was bugged by these voices and he made local inquiries around his village and here and he found Diana. And he said, were you in that field the other night? She said, yes. We were meditating for a pattern and do you know it appeared? He said, yes, and I made it. And that was a profound moment because now the circle has gone full circle. The urge from a person who's making one, from the person who has meditated to requiring one, coming from an instruction. I want to add to this my own personal piece shortly too, that I have not spoken about publicly before. And so that right there is the completion of a full circle. I just, 10 days ago, left Arizona with this guy, Dr. Stephen Greer. I don't know how many of you are conversant with Stephen Greer. He really was the guy that started the Disclosure Project, trying to encourage the United States government to release its UFO documents. Well, it's well on the road now, it's well on the way. Whether it will actually happen truthfully, we will have to wait and see. But I was with him and a group of about 50 other people, Oliver's Castle, England, July 24, 1992. When we too did a process, we all need to do this because it is, when you speak like this, unbelievable, and yet it's fact. This is what happens. We did a meditation under his guidance. He has a process that he works on, which he calls vectoring into this position a contact with extraterrestrial species. That's what he claims he can do. Well, I was with him on this particular occasion, and what we all did, and I'll just speak for myself, independently, with nobody trying to maneuver my thinking at all, we went into quiet space. And then at the end of this space, at this time, which was probably 20 minutes, he said, does everybody have a pattern in their minds that they would like to vector this thing into position with? I, for myself, yes, I had an equilateral triangle. And so did every other person there. Different varieties, straight lines, circles, different combinations of an equilateral triangle. And it appeared that night within sight right there. Ever since then, of course, this is the SETI logo based upon that. There was a UFO experience within a few hours, which was kind of relatively minor, but nonetheless it was very strange. There was low cloud, stratus cloud, And half of this group, this is about 50 people, all intermingled. It wasn't like a group there and over there. We were intermingled, 50 people. And through the cloud, at speed, came this diffusion, a ball of light that was in the cloud, at speed, coming through like this. From where I was stood, it was like from over there, up like this. And when it got directly overhead, it split two ways, like that. It just boom, boom, out. What I saw was a white, as bright and as white as these lights here, diffused, breaking two ways. Half of the people saw what I saw. The other half, for reasons I can't explain, I don't know of anybody yet who can, we're wired differently. Half of us are wired different to the other half, I think. We has to be that way, because the other half swear that it was as red as that right there. That cherry red, that light there. I mean, that's very different. Bright white light, cherry red. And each of us are absolutely adamant. Same track, same event, two different colours. Frequency variation dependent upon who you are. So that's that story. Here's another one. 6th of July 1995, 10 p.m. People I know who I've worked with for many years decided to blind test the scientific community. And so they went into this field and they made two circles and connected it with this loop, like that. Well, 7th of July, I want to come to and fro on this a little bit. This circle here, this is not a swirled circle. This is an area, as this one is fragmented by this tractor tire mark, like something that kind of applied itself, that was scattered due to the line itself, the tractor tire mark. I don't know this. It's just simply that on the ground, you can see by the colour of each plant that this is a circle, the same diameter as this one, but that is definitely broken up there. But there's two things to say. It forms, these two now have placed this man-made structure into a perfect equilateral triangle. This circle and this, the mean value of those two is this. Now, people have said to me, rightly so, but perhaps those were already there. Okay, well, the guys, first of all, who made it, were not aware of it. But if they were, then they too were primed to put this precisely with respect to those, forming a very important geometry. Or they weren't there before. I mean, you can have it either way, that they were not there and they formed with respect to this positioning that night. Whichever way it is, it still provides us with a very important piece of information. So here we now have the same equilateral triangle all coming out of two guys that are going to blind test the science. But that's what they got. Now, this is my own personal experience. Went on for 2 weeks, all except actually 2 nights. This, for anybody who may have seen it, but it goes way back in years, 1986 this happened. A movie was made of it. It was transmitted in this country, even though I was then living in Great Britain. Gateway to the Unknown was the name of the movie, made as a result of what was happening in my house. What was happening was this. At 4:15 on the face of a clock, battery operated, has nothing to do with the grid system, and the grid system, and the alarms, the radar alarms, the low-level infrared alarms that activated, telling the police to come to my home automatically at 4:15 every night for 2 weeks, bar 2, only stopping after I have a British patent for the activation system that's up in the corner of the room that actually gives the auto dial to the police to come to your home because a person's in your house, right? I mean, all it does is it separates the thermal effect of a heat bubble coming off of a radiator or the AC creating some localized effect, and it kind of susses this out electronically to say, no, this is a human being moving across that room. And so the police are called automatically. And I look at this, and I was, for 2 weeks, my first wife was at the end of her tether. My daughter was being woken, my neighbours were being woken, and the police were being called. This was not anything I could possibly keep to myself. It's very widely known in my town where I come from, all about what was happening here. I sat down, on the last time this happened, people say to me, well, why do you think it stopped? What was the message? Well, what I realised was it was always at 4:15. 415 communicated on the face of a clock. And I looked at the pins here. This is the pins that were placed in the map. This is a Japanese scientist who came over to look at it. This is my own map, putting different coloured pins each year where the crop circles were appearing. Just putting them in, and blind to the fact, because I'm looking at it every day, blind to the fact that they formed an equilateral triangle. And that equilateral triangle between these three ancient towns, this is our field right here. This is the UFO capital of the world, was then Warminster, and this is the old city of Wantage. All the pins over all of the years formed an equilateral triangle of 415, 415, which is 41.5 miles down each leg of an equilateral triangle. There was one piece of information only that was not communicated to me by looking at that map that night, which ended that whole sequence. They stopped, everything went back to normal, and we had normal sleep. One piece of information that did not come out of that came out of another extraordinary experience. Many of you in this room tonight know my wife, Cynthia, and who would have been here tonight had it not been for circumstances back home. We were asleep. We were not yet married. I was visiting the United States, and we were asleep in Susie's home, that is her mum's home, in Branford. Middle of the night, my eyes just opened just like that. It just simply, I can't remember, I don't think there was any dreams involved. I don't remember anything about a dream. It was just like my eyes are open and I couldn't move. The eyes are open and I had this extraordinary download of information. It's the only way I can describe it. I was given a video playback of all the pins going in year after year, forming the equilateral triangle, telling me that the baseline, centre of the baseline, just where those plants and the chlorophyll, I should have told you that. Those two previous circles that appeared when the guys were wanting to check the science, those were not swirled circles. The chlorophyll, the green in the plant, had been removed to form an equilateral triangle. Well, the same thing, same arrangement right here is being given to me with my eyes open and I'm unable to move in the bed in Branford here. And what I'm also given is this baseline, half the base up to the apex, is an important ratio right there. Blew my mind when I looked on the map. I mean, this is after years, you could say, of sloppy research, going right bang through the centre of Stonehenge, right there, at 41.5 miles, forming, this is our field again, is right there. Now, there's a lot more to that. This went on for several minutes, and I just felt, I don't know whether you've ever had this experience, when you know that what you're getting, whether you're in the shower or whatever, wherever you are when these unique, extraordinary moments occur, it's like you know this is so important and you dare not forget it. And yet, when it leaves you, you do. It's like, and this was like, God, I've got to get up and write this down. And I explained this last week and a few days ago in Malta. How this felt to me was, it's like volume being turned down. As this effect left me, was like turning the volume down, but not in audible terms. It felt like the level of connection with something supreme was being turned down. It's going, it's leaving me. And as it left me, I was able to move. And Cynthia, she would have told you this for herself now. As I say, obviously, I will tell you it for her now. Her next book, a chapter in the next book is going to be, is the result of what I'm about to tell you. I looked at Cynthia, to explain what had just happened, because her eyes have now opened. This is the middle of the night and her eyes are open, and I know something's going on. It's just exactly the same. She's just glued there. It's just like glaring. Several minutes, and it left her. And she said, "What just happened to you? What just happened?" I said, "Tell me. Well, tell me, what did you get?" She said, "It was this equilateral triangle." It's like, oh my God, tell me what happened. She said, "It's important with regard to the placement of energy and healing in the human body." And she started doing this, and she was going, and as you come out like that and lock the center of her hands to this is the best I could get off of the internet. So the hands should actually be a little further apart, forming an equilateral triangle up to the third eye, the intuitive third eye right here, and giving these two ratios as being important. This is exactly what I just had seconds before, related to the placement of subtle energy, whether it is of the highest magnitude or of the most subtle creature, mind-like magnitude. The placement is important. And so that's what she got. The other was what I got. It's all the same thing. And that book just is what she is literally writing now. It's just gone into the autumn catalogue for next year. Obviously it's going to be called Path of Energy, which was there's just one chapter inspired by what she was given about that. And so, just to say here now, what we're clearly looking at is an important geometry. This was a discussion I was having down there in Tucson a few days ago with Richard Hoagland and Stephen Greer, when outside, unbeknownst to me completely, since the 29th up until the very day I was talking with these other two people, the same form was appearing in the sky over the top of Tucson in Arizona. The largest sighting, thousands, since the Phoenix Lights, you'll see it on the internet, was appearing in the skies overhead in the same form. And so the geometry, I think, is established as significant. Now then, this is the problem for those in power in society. So this is last year. This farmer, this is the problem, this is the challenge of the time that we're in now, head on. This farmer firing a gun over the heads of researchers coming in to research for the truth, being told that they're all made by people. So the police are in a position to having to enforce what the government line, that is the social engineering that's being done to control this whole thing. So here's the problem. Wiltshire police turn up with armed guards. That's maybe more common here than it is in England. The police are not armed. So this was an armed unit sent out to get this farmer under control and to arrest him. Helicopter over top, police dogs, sniffers on the ground. Next couple of days afterwards, spokesman for the National Farmers Union, Ian Johnson. Now remember, this is the law saying enough. Enough. We got a farmer firing off shotgun. Enough. Spokesman for the National Farmers Union, Ian Johnson, said there is no doubting crop circles cause aggravation and incredible cost to the farmers. We know crop circles are man-made and they cause huge problems for the farmers because these crops are grown to earn the farmer income. As farmers, we do not want to prevent people accessing the countryside, but this is vandalism. Things changed. Less than 1 week later, same police station that have sent armed police officers out to arrest this farmer, now one of their own, a police sergeant, is driving back from that police station where they have sent that out 1 week before. Remember, all these circles are man-made, okay? He's coming home, and to his right, just after 5:30, there are these huge, tall beings, light beings, in a field alongside a Mayan design, a crop circle design of Mayan traditional geometry. These guys are just up here. This is the actual field behind her. It's my photograph. We flew over to look into this. My colleague is still there talking with the police officers. This is ongoing. I'm going to give you the latest in just a few seconds. So he comes along, he sees these beings, he stops his car, he's thinking initially, it's some kind of laboratory process underway. Somebody's out there testing. So he stopped his vehicle, he's a police officer, he's in uniform. He walks across the road, he gets through these barbed wire fence, and he shouts out to these guys. They're actually broken up across here. There's three separate places, not bunched as you see them here. And it's just like he's speaking to the fresh air. They totally ignore him, oblivious to him being there. He noticed that there was a rippling energy field bouncing the plants, the heads of the plants a little oscillating, much like a heat haze that you might see out there, around these guys, one large circular area around them. And he shouts it out again, and they got their attention. As they turned to him, the energy field and their attention rippled towards him. So the energy field came down at him. He had an immediate severe headache when it got to him, embraced him. Remember, Pat Delgado, Ariel, all that stuff? Lots of things connecting, but these guys are then, he's got their total attention. And he's shouting out to them, and he said, like leopards, they turned and they ran at speeds as unbelievable. Away up the hill, one had a wand-type device in which he was stroking through the plants as if he was testing something there. But when he shouts like this, they're moving in the opposite direction. And as they reached the top of this hill, just before going over the top, they melted away. Just simply melted away. Okay, well, this is, again, this is the actual field, the actual photograph taken from his perspective. He actually came through this barbed wire fence when they headed off up here. We flew over, and this is the energy field at the top. Of course, it's artist's impression. And they just simply melted away here. One of these guys was in the standing crop. When we got over there, several days later, we found what we believe certainly was this track that was plants pushed over, and it heads to just simply like 2 or 3 plants gone, just as he said, just gone. Well, that's the other end of my mate Busty. He is the doer. This guy he's always the guy in the party who's the one who's doing the work. Busty is a good guy. And that's the Mayan design that these entities, tall beings, were close to. They were kind of just here. The police officer is continuing now. His life is completely upside down. This guy, I mean, as you can imagine, this boy has been believed, his word has spoken for putting people in prison. I mean, this guy is a solid, truthful police officer. And now his reality is shattered, completely shattered. A couple of months ago now, he and his wife were asleep, and he lives close to the town of Marlborough. And he will only converse with one person he knew is a researcher, one person who I'm working with. He won't talk to anybody else. He will not talk to me or anybody else. So he's got a rapport going with this man. And he said that he woke up suddenly when his wife was screaming. This was a couple of months ago, since this happened. And immediately his eyes were open. There were three same tall white beings, light beings at the end of the bed. She had opened her eyes and screamed. His immediate reaction was to lurch at them. He got straight at the bed, and as he went towards them, they started to fade. And he says that over a minute before the light completely dissipated, but there was the outline, real form initially, and in the moment his gesture went to them, they started to fade out. And just over a minute before it faded right out, there's one bout of research of the carpet fibres has now been completed. They're going to run it again through another laboratory. but this is not, these fibres are not burnt, but they are scorched in 3 spots, and they've got a residue, bizarrely, of mercury in each of those locations, which are not in the controls of the remaining fibre. So for whatever that counts for, that's where it is. Right, I would like, just to kind of close us down here, 2012. Well, it hasn't been a lengthy study for me or for Cynthia. We were asked to write the Complete Idiot's Guide series for 2012. We did the best with the help of many native people, with scientists, with some NASA input, other people, to try and get the best we could to be fair, honest, without being scaring people. And I will say, I don't see his face here. I thought maybe there was a chance that a former FBI anti-terrorist officer would be here today, who we've gotten to know well, who is an amazing astrologer. And we had him with another astrologer I was with last week look at 2012 through astrology. And there's a number of things. First of all, we look at what the Mayans said, what they believe this cycle was all about. Separate that, look at what is actually happening right out there now, as our world is decoupling and falling apart. Bring that, take that over there. Look at the astrology and what it speaks to, which is extraordinary. And again, you place it and you overlay it, just as Busty Taylor said, wouldn't it be something to have all we've ever seen brought into one? 2012 is that. There's a period here which is the transition, it would seem, from one cycle, a very long cycle, into another amazing period for humanity. But of course the big question is, we've got to get there first. And so as we transition into an amazing golden age, which is what the Mayans themselves said, we're looking at before the first Katun that ends in the next new cycle, which is up to 2033, we have got to be in one place and a cohesive period of the best elements of humanity. So what we got here, right outside this window, we've got lots of alarming things going on. We've got solar cycle 24. NASA have already put out, as you might know, a number of governments have now received warnings for contingency arrangements to be made in case solar cycle 24 should exceed or be anywhere near what they think might be coming. The last cycle of 11 years in solar activity went into a very suspiciously low, quiet period. That does not bode well for where it's likely to go. And so this is something we've all got to think about, and I'd like to give you a scenario in a second. That situation is coming up right up here for 2012 into 2013 at its peak. Now this is just simply a good, bad global fitness health chart, which is really breaking down things that we depend upon for our survival. So population coming into 7 billion 2012. Climate change, the trend is there, whether we're blaming Al Gore or not, we're in trouble. Human health, because of global warming, you've got a higher distribution of temperatures and all of the terrible diseases that go with it. I'm not going to hold on this. Economy, we already know, is in a terrible spin. And with all the experts really believing this is not over. We're into a false holding of the situation up into the next election, and then all hell will be let loose. Because you cannot generate any more than what's already been spent. Can we imagine what $1.25 trillion debt is? It's the largest in human history. Even the interest on it could not possibly be paid. And so we got a problem. That de-escalation, that running down to 0 point, as they're all going in there at the same time. Global warming now, it's now 9 out of the last 11 years, global temperatures hotter and higher than ever before. On record, that is. So all of that spells problem. religious conflict is in there, and I don't want to hone on it. It's the astrologers in particular are very, very concerned about this. Very concerned about it. And that is the chart for the 2012, which is the finger of God. It's a very rare alignment, astrological alignment, but it is there. Right, if for those who might, as many have, just coming from Malta, some did, doubt the Mayan scholars. These guys were scholars. That is the sky at night, Guatemala, noon local time, December 21, 2012. If those guys knew that, then I'm prepared to listen to them, because that's what's out there at that time, Guatemala, that day. You can see what there is. There's Venus, Mercury, the Sun, Mars, Neptune, Uranus, the Moon on an arc across the sky with the winged horse between Polaris and the arc. So they knew something. This crop design, there's more thrown to this, at it, in research than any I've been involved in the last 30 odd years. We threw everything at this for fairly obvious reasons. That is the solar system. This appeared as over 300 feet across in a field where you've been listening to all evening, in our fields. The message consistent as over television network frequency, as design in the fields at the Crabwood transmitter, and now at this design in our fields. What that speaks to is a particular alignment and the Earth missing from its orbit. This actually is a design that represents, just as the Mayans said, the end of the first Katun of the 5th Golden Age. 3rd of September 2033, where if we have a cohesion of all of the elements we've been talking about, the very highest of humanity, of those qualities that take us to a better place, if we can be as one force by this date, it is believed by those who are looking at this geometry, we will be in position. If we are not, we will not. And so that's the design, that's what it means. And what I would say to that, as you can see on the screen, I'd just like to read you one section from the book. After I say, of course, this is just my own words, my own feeling, is that no government, religion, business, or non-visible form, another secret form, have the right to place conditions on the advancement of human consciousness and where truth must lead. Humanity will not experience a truly spiritual existence without that truth, love, and development of intuition as givens. Coherence, there's the word. Coherence is demanded for survival of our species and others on this planet. The circles themselves have spoken. To us, through us, this must be our defining moment. At the 11th hour, finally, as the past disintegrates, we get our opportunity to transition and rebuild, this time with truth and respect. This is the moment. We are at the crossroads. It's now up to us. And I'd like to read this to you in closing. This comes from the book. It'll take me about 3 minutes to read. With Cynthia, I should say that. Our travels around the world and our discussions with the elders of many traditions, we have come across attitudes that repeat in all traditional cultures. I've got a man sat right here that knows a lot about this, Ellis. These are attitudes that can assist us all in the transition now underway. We are over the threshold. You will not be surprised, these 4 cornerstones are things every culture teaches. Respect for self, for others, for all life forms, for the planet itself, for the celestial bodies, for those we walk beside, for our ancestors, for our descendants. Gratitude. Everything is a gift. Nothing can be taken for granted. Not the fruits of the earth, not the ground we walk on, not the people we love, or the wealth we aspire to. However much we may deserve something, or however hard we've worked for it, what we have is a gift and can be taken at any moment, including life itself. Harmony and balance. The flow of life exists in rhythms and our harmonics. All things have their place. All people, all life forms, all events, both good and bad, have their place in the circle of life. To stay in harmony and balance requires taking no more than we need and giving back equal to what we use. Resonance with the cycles and flow brings great joy and gratitude. Interconnectedness, and I'll end with this. We are all one part of the same whole. What affects you affects me. What we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the nice presentation, Colin.
Thank you, Mel.
How much would you be able to tell us about that document you had to withdraw from the publications and your presentations? I'm very much interested in knowing
Yes.
about it.
Okay. Well, I had the phone call from England telling me that they had observed on my website a document from the Queen. This was a personal document which makes reference to what she believes and her husband, Prince Philip, believes was taking place at Operation White Crow, which was the events that we've discussed. And that's probably as much, unfortunately, as I can say, because it was purely the fact that this was a personal opinion of the head of state of Great Britain, who is the Queen. I know it's a strange system that the Prime Minister and the Parliament is elected to do the people's work, and yet the head of state is the Queen. It's a very delicate situation. Some of the Princess Diana stuff, all of that, and frankly, where the past has come to feel out of place with the present. And the tradition that runs back thousands of years in Europe with the royal households in Germany and England really are they're just not fitting into mesh with modern times. And so there's great difficulty there, and anything that the media can get a hold of and use against the royal household, I think they're very afraid of. And the moment that it was seen that this was a personal opinion of the head of state related to a report that came from me through somebody, another contact, this was an involvement with a personal opinion that they were not prepared to take. So just a threat, basically, of taking me for all I would ever be worth to remove it, and quickly. This is as much as I would say about it. Oh, sorry, just there is one more little piece. I'll come right to you. There was reference in that letter to a man who I had spent a little while with, Uri Geller. And the Uri Geller effect of bending plants, bending metal, giveaway there, was thought to be a useful experiment if we were able to bring him in, which he has offered to do, to actually create a circle with his mind. That was also referred to in that letter.
Only that part of the world, these crop circles have appeared. No other sites in the world have had any of that type of activity?
Right.
Wow.
There are something like 27, 28 countries that have crop circles, but none of them anything like that hotspot in central southern England. The United States, off the top of my head, I could have brought the database and we could have looked at it on the screen. Many states here, Idaho, Ohio, New York State in particular, have them. But there is nothing that equates to Great Britain in that area of central southern. The Netherlands, Germany have their hotspots, really quite reasonably busy ones too. Fragmented time here and there, Australia, not a lot. But yeah, it's spread around. We really were getting very little feedback until we did the first television programs into this country from England, which was Unsolved Mysteries, the first program. That got a lot of feedback. We got a lot of feedback from the production company that transmitted Unsolved Mysteries. And it was giving us data we didn't know existed here in the United States. Sir.
Is there anything telltale you can point to that says this is different between a fake and a real? You mentioned something about plants being affected at their core.
Yeah. This is a little more difficult than you might think. I used to say something different to what I'm now saying. It's like, I think anybody who's worth their salt should modify according to data. So I'll tell you what I used to say and I'll tell you what I now say. What I would have said in the past was, first of all, there are no entry and exit points to the geometry, and there's no obvious way for the person who would make or not make them to get to a particular point. And so if there were no tracks in or out, there's no compression of the soil, there's no damage to the plants are changed at the cellular anatomic level. There's a magnetic anomaly, which is about 300% that of the Earth's natural Earth's magnetic field. Those things exist where we believe this is a genuine circle. The opposite, where it is man-made, that it is rough, that there are errors, certainly sometimes. There is damage to the plants. There is compression of the soil. There is no cellular anatomical changes. There are no differences in the Earth's magnetic field, and on and on. I've been around the world looking at them, and I can certainly tell you that there are very few, but a few, simple circles in Japan, in Taiwan, where in paddy fields, where you would sink if you were out there making it, and there they are without the obvious signs. I've been to the outback of Australia, where only 2 people lived. And either those 2 people were fooling me, or what I was looking at was different. And I believe it was different. This is in the outback, where there's very, very thin, very poor quality cereal crops, 11 in that particular case, in the outback of Australia, swirled in all the ways, traditional ways that we've come to learn, which I believe to be genuine. And I could go on, in Brazil and so on and so on and so on and so on. So those are kind of are the differences. Now I would get back to what I now say with one difference. It has not made me flavour of the week. But this is the time. This is where we have to have the truth, because there's important stuff on the end of it. It is regrettable that I have to say that in the time that I was funded by Lawrence Rockefeller in New York for a 2-year period, I've funded the rest myself and my family, have taken the weight of this on for all those years. But for 2 years, Lawrence Rockefeller, and with some coming in from the royal family in Germany, for a 2-year specific investigation into people making crop circles. And so in that period of time, it became clear to me that the science coming out of the plant analysis by, I think it's probably best I don't name, I'm not into names, this is not over destroying anybody, credible scientist, biologist, who was the person responsible for me making that statement to you about changes at the cellular anatomic level. Well, the science was not as good as we hoped. And whilst it has not been admitted publicly, I personally have enough data for me to back away from it, not to put that forward as a reason for being real versus not real. So those are the only differences, and I'll leave it at that. But it has caused, as you can imagine, significant hassle. I think we're on the here.
About a year or so ago, I heard a brief clip on a news program, and it quoted Leon Panetta, who was new to the administration, making the statement that he felt the people of this country were ready to get the truth, and he was making that recommendation to the highest levels of government, the president. I heard it personally. I never saw it picked up in the newspaper, any media. So my question is, in the Air Force particularly, why are they sitting on this? What's the rationale for that?
That's a huge question, and it's a great question. I know also precisely the statement you're referring to, that, as you say, he did make. He is still out there making those sounds privately, but not now publicly. I'll give you a little bit of meat to this. I consider Edgar Mitchell to be a friend of mine. That's the Apollo 14 six-man stand on the moon. A couple of days ago, we were discussing one or two facets of this very question. And let's just go here. Not many people know that Edgar Mitchell, when he came back from the moon, decided, because his family lived local to Roswell, of all places, Roswell, New Mexico, he was doing talks about his trip to the moon locally around Roswell, and got to hear from the audience, as we would do here, comments about this disc that had been recovered at Roswell in 1947 and the beings that were in and around the disc. Well, because he has more clout than people like myself, a very well-known man of great respect in this country, very intelligent scientist, he was given authority to speak to the National Security Council around the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Washington, and was told, confirmed categorically, that the United States government did recover an extraterrestrial disc and entities that were in and around that disc in 1947, as well as other things. That's the first thing. Secondly, and again, I don't wish to keep harping upon these last two presentations, but they've been rather important. I had a NASA guy approach me, spent some time with me just last 2 weeks ago, again, on the same subject. There's lots of places we can go with this. I'm not sure whether you're aware that less than 2 weeks ago, at the National Press Club in Washington, the individuals that had their hands on the Minuteman missiles, nuclear missiles, were coming forward now. There's a whole list of them. There's another 150 or so in the wings prepared to come, saying that at this particular time, I think you're aware of this, that UFOs at ground level, above ground level, were seen. At that same moment in time, they were scrambling, or something was scrambling, the codes to the nuclear missiles, not just there, but across the entire country, right there. And then Russia had the same thing. So you have here a higher level of intelligence that is fully capable of neutralizing nuclear warheads around the world. That's the one thing. On the other hand, you have a country, which is the United States, standing out from the others who are now releasing documents. Brazil have gone, France have gone, UK are into the third phase of releasing allegedly secret documents, UFOs. The United States are holding back, waiting, I think, personally. They're waiting, they're sussing out the reactions, what comes out of the spillover from these other countries, because this is the final, kind of the answer to it. One, extraterrestrials are here. They're not only here, there's a species that is using the minds of human beings. They are part of who we are. And that's where the subset of the it's all right, just blank right out. There comes a time, I guess, when you dry right up. The brain, help me, Mel. Neurons, thank you, thank you. Mel knows everything. of the neurons, they're using them, they're utilizing them where the urges come from. We think are ours, or somebody else's. My view is that we are actually working according to somebody else's plan. That would be, if you were pushed me to the corner, I believe that we are indeed working to somebody else's plan. So I think that, and finally, the back engineering, I'm sorry to keep saying me, but I spent a long time with Philip Corso, who was the security advisor to President Eisenhower. I spent 10 days with that man. And this is a guy who was the head of the back-end engineering process for the NSA, National Security Agency, back engineering the exact thing in Roswell. So the United States have a huge leaping advantage using for military purposes the technology of an extraterrestrial species. Hence why they are waiting to the very last moment to say, this is it. And the politics that's being played out is extraordinary, is beyond me, but I think that's it.
The gentleman who addressed the National Press Corps fascinated me. He mentioned the fact that they've come over and they've actually turned on and turned off atomic devices. They find them hovering over the devices.
Yeah.
And the following few days, I was amazed there was nothing in the media. So I got his telephone number and I called him in the morning, not knowing where I was calling. I got him out of bed, he was sleeping, because he's out in California. And I asked him the same question I asked you, why are we sitting on this? And he laughed. And he said, because the Air Force, they counter anything that you hear, and they discredit. And he said he couldn't answer that question either. But he felt that it was, as you stated, we're getting close. There may be disclosure.
Yeah, almost certainly. I know, with our discussions within the family, I'm often kind of asked, well, how sure can you be in the field in which I'm involved in that we are that close? Its amber lights have been going on this last 24 months. I mean, significantly. The guy that I started with, Nick Pope, he's still sworn to the Official Secrets Act. The guy is still, he's the interface between the public and the British government on this disclosure process. There's still stuff that I'm aware of that's not been released that hopefully will be. They're doing this piecemeal, they're getting very, very close. And in fact, in some ways, we're watching disclosure taking place right before our very eyes. It's just that final moment, that piece that says, that's them right there. It really is that close. For me now, we could just as well say, we know precisely what it's all about. But at the end of the day, we still have to resolve in our hearts and in our minds how we tackle the problem we've now got. And we still have a very large part dishonest society. We have 100 channels of either advertisements, which are exaggerations. We've got Hollywood that puts out nothing that's educational for our kids. We've got little hope for our children coming out of what has just occurred out there, with the meltdown. So there's a lot to confront, and we just do simply have to find it in ourselves to do something about it.
With the proclivities of human nature over the past 6,000 years in this current age that we're in. You have a spectrum. On the one end, you have the Mother Teresas of the world, and on the other end, you have the Adolf Hitlers and the Stalins and such. And as you just mentioned, we're dealing with some tremendous problems that are going to seem to play themselves out. That's out of control, in other words.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is going to happen. Will we receive help from Vrillion, from the Ashtar Command and beings from advanced civilizations to help us with this addiction that we have to the dualistic dialectic that we've been imprisoned with for all these years? Or are we going to go by the way of Atlantis?
Of course, I can't answer it. I can only tell you that meditation, it sounds a real cop-out to say it, meditation, the peace and quiet of the cutting out the extraneous noise, cutting out the engineering that governments and others would want us to be working with, is to search and go within, and the comfort and the power and the confidence of yourself is all we need. It's the faith in ourselves. Faith is important, and faith in ourselves is even more important. Could I just please give you one other thing? And this is a sharing. This isn't me giving anything, it's a sharing. I'd like to, just for a moment, give you a scenario which, if you have not thought about, it will be well worth time thinking about it. Solar cycle 24. We leave here now, and tomorrow afternoon, 2 minutes to 3, so we might be in Madison, Cheshire, or Brantford, or wherever, New York City, and hearing pop, 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 transformers, bum, 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 burning out. Everything that's grounded to earth, out. Lights go out, cell phones don't work, GPS not working, no modern vehicle with electronic systems are working. And suddenly, in 17, it is estimated, 17 seconds of a major burst. We had one here just weeks ago that happened to be going off in another direction. We're not anywhere near the peak yet. So, this is tomorrow. This could happen tomorrow. Nothing, no engineering, no technology that we've now become not just a little reliant upon, totally reliant upon, is working. No telephone contact, no lights, no car, no nothing. Where's your little children? Where's the kids? Where's your husband? Where's your wife? How am I going to find out where they are? Are they okay? Where have we arranged to meet? Something that every single one of us should have in our pocket, children should have in their pockets, as just a backdrop precautionary step to take. In the event of what may well happen, governments have been warned about. I know somebody personally, it was at meetings just a couple of months ago on this very thing. It is estimated that if the pulse of which I am talking about occurs, the grid system in the Western world will take between 12 and 15 years to reconstruct. That's a long time to be lost. And so what I would say, and we can take it on the lighter side now, this may not happen, but it is a precaution worth taking, is to make sure the kids, the husband and wife, know that if any day in the future, next coming 48 months or so, this should occur, that we will always meet at this place, and that we will all be making our way to this point. The kids will be shepherded by authorities. Where would they want to go? Mum and Dad said, this is where I must meet them, at this place. And so bicycles, having a spare one in the shed, no bad thing. A hand pump for water, no bad thing. These are just precautions. You know, your normal kind of stuff that the US is actually normally quite good about because of tornadoes and things that ripped through 100 feet of this very building a couple of weeks ago. These are good things to do anyway. But this is going to be a very difficult period. We're heading into a difficult period, and the other side of it could be the best thing we could ever have dreamt about for our planet. That's where we are. I think we'd probably call that wraps. Thank you, friends. Enjoy. Appreciate it.
Alan, good friends with Colleen.
Oh, nice. Thank you very much, Colin.
Pleasure.
Lovely.